you ever thought that at any moment in your life, you're being watched? Even now, in this very room.
A few years back, I was covering weekend shifts at a movie theater on the north side of Pueblo, Colorado. I don't remember the year, just that Hotel Transylvania 2 and a Tom Hanks spy movie was playing. I was armed security down there because the theater tended to see large numbers of customers, and sadly those guests would smoke weed in the bathroom, get in fistfights, sneak into other theaters, so it was regularly a long shift. The shifts tended to be 5 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. when the last show gets out for the night. I don't know any history of the theater, but right around October, odd occurrences began to spark off after 10 p.m. on Friday and Saturday nights. Usually, most kids and family movies didn't go past 10:45, so I only had teenagers and adults to contend with. One Saturday night, close to Halloween, events started to happen very frequently. At around 11, after some movies started their last showings, the assistant manager and I were walking the hallways and checking empty theaters. She was a young student at the university not far from the theater, very mature and straight-faced. While we were in the empty theater that just let out, we began seeing light flashes, but not like the lights for the walkway or overhead, more like a flashlight, but an older, dimmer one. We couldn't find the origin of the light, so we maybe thought it was a technician that would check on the reels and projection devices. After leaving the theater and checking on a small concession stand, I was leaning over the counter as she was collecting the money from the register, placing the cash in a bank bag. While standing there just talking about pointless junk, the soda machine started spraying from 3 of the 8 spouts. The assistant manager yelped and literally jumped backwards. Frazzled, she grabbed the bank bag and declared that she was returning to the main office. I continued checking active theaters to ensure no one was conducting themselves inappropriately, and to my pleasant surprise, no one was doing anything that warranted me to get involved. I shortly after returned to the main lobby, where a few employees remained, all doing some end-of-the-night cleaning task. I, waiting for the second to last showing of the night to let out, decided to hang out in a little arcade to kill time. Sitting on a chair next to the Time Crisis 3 machine, I was mindlessly scrolling Facebook, regularly checking my watch to see if the movie was about to end, when a basketball shooting hoops game siren belted out and flashed. The assistant manager walked in and jokingly said, "Hit the high score?" I looked at her and then looked at the game. I've been sitting here for about 15-20 minutes. She then told me that the siren only goes off when someone gets over a certain amount of points, but shouldn't have sounded unless played. "There hasn't been anyone in here with me at all," I said. Going pale, she stated she was going on her last break for the night and left out the side service door to have a cigarette. Finally, after 2 hours from what happened in the arcade, the final movie of the night was getting out. I stood by the main exit, thanking people and telling them to have a good night. Just before the last group of people who straggled after using the restrooms left, the technician up in the projection hallway called for the assistant manager, stating that an issue just started. I walked to the theater the assistant manager was standing in, which was across the hallway from the last movie that was just let out. "Apparently the system hates us," she asserted. I replied with, "What's going on?" The technician joined us in the theater. A movie was starting and stopping the same 30-second scene and was skipping and restarting like a song on a scratched CD. Because of this weird defect, the assistant manager released the regular staff and ushers for the night, but her, the technician and I stayed for a while longer. The technician was able to stop and fix the issue, but I couldn't tell you what he did or even how the issue started. Now the 3 of us were finally leaving, and it was just before 3 a.m. As the assistant manager was setting the alarm, the basketball arcade game's high score siren went off again. The technician and I went over to see if maybe someone was hiding in the arcade, but neither of us could find anyone. But I remember standing in that little arcade, looking around and how unusually cold it had become. Again, this was October in Colorado, so being cold is 50-50. But this felt like a blast of AC. After 10 minutes of not finding anything, we all left with no further incident. I, to this day, don't know if it was all odd occurrences or paranormal, but I have a feeling a playful poltergeist made themselves known. Summer 2019. My current armed security company was working in an old defunct factory in southern Pueblo, Colorado, not far from the steelworks mill. The new owner of this property was planning on converting this property into the largest indoor medical marijuana grow in the state, but it was severely run down and massively unstable. In all reality, this structure should have been condemned. Because it was full of holes in the walls and windows, homeless would often go in and squat over the years, and some died of exposure, and occasionally local gangs would do unlawful acts. The new owner thought boarding it up and placing an expensive alarm system would be more than enough to deter people from unlawfully entering. After about a month, we were hired to watch the facility in the overnight hours. This location was horrible. Chemical waste that turned into sludge puddled on the floor in spots. Bullet holes riddled the walls and pillars in the back warehouse. Black mold and other issues were present. The old Foreman Overlook office was structurally unsafe, connected to a no longer existent catwalk. For the first 2 or so months, I didn't work the site, but was hearing about other officers who encountered a phenomenon that seemed otherworldly. Even one of my staff getting a rosary blessed by his priest to wear while working there. Now, being a very hot and dry area of the state, the summers in Pueblo were unforgiving in our all-black uniforms and level 3A soft armor vests. And the dark of the night wasn't much of a relief. In late May, I had my first scheduled shift. I wasn't told by our supervisor until just after 9 p.m. that the alarm system was temporarily shut off. So I had to enter this disgusting place to ensure that no one was inside. Luckily, we were provided breathing apparatuses because of the chemical waste and mold. The inside warehouses were massive, breaking into smaller bays and rooms that had high concrete walls. It looked more like a bunker than an old factory. I started with the smaller front offices. All seemed relatively fine until I found the kitchen area or break room. All I know for sure is it had a sink and a broken disconnected stove. In the corner of the room behind the stove was a fully formed, painted pentagram with Jewish symbols at each point. A tightening chill ran through my back, but I kept moving forward. Further down, when I entered the northern warehouse, I noticed mist coming from my breath, like when you exhale during the winter. This was May, a relatively hot month, and especially for Pueblo. I didn't feel cold and wasn't smoking in the building, so this made no logical sense. As I was pondering this, my LED rechargeable flashlight began dimming aggressively. I charged the battery for a full 8 hours the night before, and it was still relatively new. But a drain like this I've never seen on any battery-operated flashlight. I was starting to feel like maybe the others I heard stories from were not over-exaggerating at the time the sinister feel to this place. I pulled out my phaser enforcer, basically a variant of the taser, and pressed onward down the darkened room. The feeling of eyes fixed on me was incredible, yet no visible person or animal was seen. I finally reached the adjoining corridor that leads into the back storage hallway, but this was still a massive room, extending most of the length of the building, and large enough for pallet loaders to pass by each other. I went down about 50 yards, still in darkness except for my phaser's light, when I came upon a rear door that opened out to the train yard. I decided that now was a good time to stop and have a cigarette to calm myself a little, as creepy wasn't part of the training. After 2 or 3 drags, a loud, guttural echoing hiss rang out menacingly from the side I had yet checked. The cavernous hallway surely must have amplified it, I thought. I stopped the butt quickly and secured the door behind me. I held my phaser at low, ready in my offhand, and my other was pressed to my sidearm, ready to draw on a moment's notice. I then realized the back area that this hall ended in was into a loading dock. Wooden boards covered the bay doors. Winds, and the only peak of light bleeding in was the weather siding on one of the rolling doors that had come loose. The only walking entrance was at the far end, past all 6 bays. I scanned each corner of the room. It was large but greatly smaller compared to the warehouse rooms, so it was much quicker to check. But nothing seemed to be here that could make a hissing noise. No animals, no old equipment, and no machinery. I checked the door at the far end to ensure it was locked, then retraced my path from the front office. The whole time making way towards the exit, I felt that someone or something was in tow on my heel. I reached the front entrance, but found I had somehow been locked in. This frightened me, as the only way to currently lock this door was using a padlock on the exterior, and I had the lock in my pocket. I started kicking the door to open it, getting a little heated. But just before the 4th kick, I heard a voice from the other side yell stop. The voice said that he was an officer with the Pueblo Police Department, and I identified myself as well. He and another officer opened the door, as somehow a small roofing nail that was thick enough to lodge into the slot got in the hole. But it doesn't explain the latch being closed. I was telling the officers that the alarm was not functioning, and I was checking to ensure one entered. The older of the 2 officers informed me that I was nuts, as they never enter that building unless they have a minimum of 4 officers. As I was placing the actual lock back on to secure the door, still speaking with the cops, I asked them what they came here for.
We received a 911 call from this location.
I replied with, like, from inside the building? One of them went to their car and double-checked and confirmed that it came from inside and listed to the property. You guys might not want to hear this, but the phones, plumbing, and electricity are all shut off in this place, I said while confirming this with a point of contact in the contract. They stayed for a few minutes more before leaving, and I didn't go back in for the rest of the night. The next day after that shift, I woke up to find 9 scratches on my back and felt like I had no energy, like I had the worst hangover ever without drinking. I ended up having to call off for the shift at a different location because I was so weak and drained. Later that week, the property owner was able to get cameras and better security sensors installed on the building, but kept us on to watch the outside perimeter. Luckily, I never had to go in that place again, only sit at the gate, but I know for myself now that something dark lingers inside that old factory. Around August of last year, we lost the contract due to the property owner selling it off, as it became a money pit for him. He said he dumped in hundreds of thousands of dollars, but progress always seemed to slow, almost like it would reverse. I'm pretty sure whatever was in there didn't like them messing with its home. Starting off, this happened nearly 10 years ago, but I recently spoke with an old co-worker that I ran into again, and talking about the old days, it was brought up. That was when I realized the feeling of being stalked wasn't limited to me. When I was about 22 and working for a very small security company of only 18 people at the time, we worked a tourist area location called Seven Falls in southwest Colorado Springs, in the Cheyenne Mountain Canyon area. I remember shifts being grueling, due mostly to the fact that we were in direct sunlight until the afternoon and evening. And an average shift, we were expected to walk a minimum of 7 miles between the base of the parking area to the top of the falls, and rarely were allowed to use the guest elevator for handicapped and elderly. The whole park was on a hilly incline, so walking the top down was okay. Bottom up is what exhausted us. In the evening, near the base of the falls, native Ute or Cheyenne tribal dancers would perform, and we had to monitor crowds, which was slight breaks for about 15 to 20 minutes. These falls were frequented by area tribes for hundreds of years and were still considered spiritual, so it was the native tribes that pushed for the performances since Seven Falls is considered a state park. At the end of the night, we would sit at the main entrance into the falls at the bottom of the canyon, off the lower Gold Camp Road, and monitor the toll booth until roughly 1 a.m. Except during weekends and holidays when we were out there till 3 in the morning. On several occasions when waiting for the end of my shifts, I always had occurrences that made me feel like I was going to get attacked by either an animal or a person. Guttural hissing, deep, mannish groans, and harassing growls could always be heard from behind the giant gate. Glowing eyes, either red or white in color, but larger than area wildlife, could be seen from behind bushes and tree canopies. But what stuck with me was a shimmering humanoid shape. The shimmering was otherworldly. The way I always described it to my family and a few friends was like that of the Predator. My first work firearm was an older Smith & Wesson semi-automatic single-stack pistol that was my dad's when he worked for the Fountain Police Department. But this was the first time I felt I was defenseless while working. I watched this shimmering silhouette crawl on the asphalt over to the toll booth. After then, it appeared to stand upright and extend a long, waving arm. This looked like a being phasing between the physical and incorporeal realms. As I shifted my weight to get a closer look, as I was awestruck, the glowing reddish eyes slowly came back in focus. Then in a snap, I hear what sounds like an animal climbing up the side of the toll booth gutter, and watched as the shimmer jumped to a tree no less than 20 feet away. From here, the shimmer jumped again. This time, a broken branch fell from the tree. A loud clashing sound rang from the top center of the gate as the shimmer looked back one last time before going over the gate and disappearing into the Seven Falls Park, bringing us to today in May of 2022. My old co-worker and I ran into each other while at Walmart. We decided to go to the Gunther Totti's diner next door. While having a burger and reminiscing about the good old days, he brings up, "Did you ever see the Predator in his active camouflage at Seven Falls?" My blood ran cold, and I dropped a shade to just about pale. He then proceeded to tell me about his experience on his shifts that I'd never heard. After leaving the diner and arriving home, I sat in the driveway for a moment, contemplating what inhabits lower Gold Camp Road. I work armed security in Colorado Springs, and a few months ago, a contract ended that we had for a couple of years. The contract was overnight front desk and building monitoring for a community transitional apartment building, or more simply, a stepping stone apartment building for working homeless waiting for public assisted housing. I hadn't worked this location since last summer, 2021, and the contract ended early 2022. Primarily, we were hired because overnight, some people caused trouble, be it homeless from the shelter next door, less than deserving tenants conducting illegal business, or standard issues involving apartment buildings. Security was limited on what we were able to handle, as the building was ran by the shelter and leasing through DHS in the state. I asked to be pulled after a 2-month rotation working there twice a week, because hey, staring at cameras and walking a small 4-story building for 12 hours at a time is boring. Now to the meat and potatoes of the post. While working there, I got to know a really cool older guy named David. David was a veteran that ended up getting caught up in drugs and alcohol when he got out of the military in the late 80s. Though he was homeless for most of his adult life, David never asked for handouts, but instead worked off any debt he felt needed. Even though David was clean from drugs and alcohol for over a decade when I met him, he was suffering from that lifestyle in his old age. But despite his failing health, David got a job working at a deli that's located at one of my company's overnight patrol services properties. A few weeks ago, as I was checking the shopping center where that deli is located, I noticed the light on inside the deli, and the dumpster behind the store had movement. I checked it out to find David standing next to the trash bags, smoking a cigarette. After a brief friendly chat catching up, I told David I had to get back on the road but would be back later in the night. Happily he acknowledged but asked if I could do him a favor and bring him a fresh pack of Newport Reds, as he would be there for a while. I agreed as he said, "I just wanted to say thank you for being kind to me." 2 hours later, I returned with the cigarettes and a gas station fruit pie. As I come behind this deli, I saw a food delivery truck and a couple of his co-workers unloading. I parked and walked up to them, asking if David was still there. Confused, the men replied that David was dead. Upset, I replied that was not funny. But the man said seriously that David died just after Valentine's Day on his way home from his shift at the deli from a heart attack. Not believing what the men were saying, I stopped at the transitional apartment building on my way to another property to drop off the cigarettes. At the front desk, the new security confirmed what the men at the deli said. The new security then stated that since he had no next of kin or a will, his apartment was just emptied earlier that week. It's now been about 5 weeks since I saw David at that dumpster, and whenever I'm working patrol on that side of town, I stop and have a smoke with my old friend, even if I can't see him anymore. Starting off, I normally work armed security and deal with crazy things on regular duty. But occasionally, senior officers get scheduled for extra duty shifts at a wedding reception hall in Black Forest, Colorado, and these shifts are mind-numbing. Uniformed yet unarmed except for our search gloves, essentially bouncers with badges, as one co-worker puts it. Primarily, we are there for the business's liquor license, making sure no drinks are going in or out the door. Recently, I was sent there last minute to cover another officer who called in. Upon arrival, I noticed it was a large Hispanic wedding party, much larger than most events I've worked at the place. I checked in at the bar and then returned to the front door to post up. After the wedding ceremony wraps up and guests were roaming around, waiting for the reception to start, I start getting asked the standard questions at these types of shifts. After 30 or so minutes, the guests fill the reception hall and the wedding party prepares to enter for the reception, with the bride and groom standing closest to me. Usually, when the wedding parties are about to make their grand entrances into the receptions, most people don't leave their tables, so I began listening to YouTube videos. Right as the video I'm listening to starts the second tale, and the best man and maid of honor are being introduced, the bride screams, "Grandmother." I look up sharply to see an older-looking woman's backside shuffle behind the doors to the chapel. At first, I assumed maybe this was an older woman with a mental disorder like Alzheimer's or dementia, until the guests start flooding into the main front hallway. The bride runs over and asks, "Did you see my grandmother?" Sharply, I replied, "The lady that walked into the chapel?" The bride began to break down crying as her family swarmed back into the chapel. As the reception was put on a hold until the bride recovered and fixed her makeup, the wedding planner and I were standing at the door talking. The groom came over and asked again if I saw a woman. Still not putting two and two together, I said yes and asked why it was such a big deal. The groom started telling the wedding planner and I that the bride was the youngest granddaughter, and her grandmother were very close. The grandmother always exclaimed to the bride that she couldn't leave the earth peacefully until her Rosa del Desierto, desert rose, married a good man. Well, the night the couple got engaged, the grandmother passed. The day of the wedding, the bride was emotionally overwhelmed to start. She was presented with a locket with her grandmother's ashes. The bridesmaids announced that they were ready to resume the reception. And as they announced the bride and groom for the first time during their entrance, the wedding planner leaned over and whispered, "Guess Grandma made the wedding regardless." Starting off, this happened last Wednesday night into Thursday morning. Recently, my company started providing armed security for an old hotel under a new name and management in southern Colorado Springs. I don't know exactly how old this place is, but it has been an active hotel since I was very young. As we started the contract, the standard for the first 2 months was to have 2 security officers working, 1 senior and 1 new. My last shift, I was paired with a real annoying rookie, and this kid was uptight and dumb. For years, it's been known that many deaths, be it suicide, natural, or even a few instances of murder, have occurred at this hotel. My concern was to make sure heavy drug users didn't sneak into the building and squat. The new kid, though, wanted to inspect everything, from the littlest noises to anyone walking around after midnight, to see if they were guests or not. Well, I think when we got called to the basement, it changed the kid's overly inquisitive nature, or just plain affected him. "Front desk to security?" The hotel radio poorly chimed out. "Go for security," I replied, thinking it was another guest call complaining about their neighbor or a homeless person in the lobby. "Can you both check the basement?" A motion sensor trip was sent to the front desk switchboard, and I wasn't down there. "You'll have to come get the key for the access stairs," the night auditor said, half awake. Thinking to myself, if we have to get a key to access it, how would have someone gotten down there? As we approached the front desk, the night auditor stated that the switchboard had gone off twice more since she called us, less than 3 minutes earlier. So, curious, I asked, how could someone get down there without a key to the stairwell door? "Oh, I forgot to mention the elevator is broken." The broken elevator. It isn't broken, it just only goes from the first floor to the service area of the basement, without the maid's keys at the moment. She stated like it was no big deal. Annoyed, I grabbed the key off the counter and told the rookie to look alive in case someone went down there, knowing that bit of information. At the mouth of the basement behind the doors, we began hearing heavy moans and breathing that sounded like it could have either been directly behind the door or on the complete other side of the basement. "Before we go in, I am the lead officer. You will not do anything unless I tell you to. Stay on my 6 and follow my lead. Do you understand?" I barked at the rookie, to which he did a quick but confident nod. I pushed open the door and announced, "Security. If anyone's here, announce yourself now." As this is standard for when we enter an area on most of our properties when suspected trespassers are present. The rookie followed in behind me as I proceeded. The safety lights were on every other fixture, so we didn't feel it necessary to turn on the full lights, since there was enough light to see everything clearly. Towards the complete opposite side of the basement, we began to hear what sounded like someone jingling a large key ring. My first thought was, oh joy, another meth head. As I began moving down the corridor, I heard the sound of the hood of a holster disengage. Pissed, I turned around to chastise the rookie for drawing his gun, but angry, turned to confusion. He was standing there, pale and fixated, eyes forward. Did you hear that?" he stammered.
I replied, "It might just be a machine switching, but remember, follow my lead."
Now, thinking that there was someone at the end of the corridor in the main laundry, I unsnapped my taser latch just in case. As we approached the end of the basement, to the other locked stairwell access, we didn't find anything out of the normal, or a person trying to nest. But as we reached the freight elevator, we found a sign that set the next set of events in motion. The sign read, "Security. All elevator access to the basement will be unavailable overnight from the 1st to the 12th. If you need access, get the key from the desk." I took a picture to show the night auditor, but got a chill while doing so. As the rookie and I began double-checking every area on the way back to the stairs we came in from, we started experiencing minor paranormal occurrences, starting after the rookie found a few spiritual items. While still in the main laundry, towards the far back secondary stairs, the rookie found an unburned bundle of white sage, wrapped in white lace, sitting on top of one of the large machines. Not knowing anything about sage, the rookie quickly snatched it off the machine. "Hey, I think I found a weird joint." I turned to see him holding the bundle of white sage. "Hey dumbass, put that down. It's not marijuana, it's cleansing sage." This kid didn't know anything about paranormal phenomena, or how to protect against it. So I told him not to pick up anything, especially if it isn't something he is familiar with. After he put it back where he grabbed it from, the first occurrence happened. As he set it down, 20 feet behind him, a shelf filled with clean folded towels fell completely off the wall. As we documented it for a report, a small snicker came from further up the corridor, but only like a split second of a snicker. We began moving up to the next section where the overstocked furniture and appliances were stored. An overhead pipe that was not leaking when we passed under it earlier was now leaking, like a huge crack just happened. I thought this was odd because I was sure with the amount of water leaking, we would have heard it regardless of our location in the basement. As I was inspecting the pipe for the point of the leak, the rookie yet again picked up something. "Hey, this isn't sage too, is it?" I see him smelling Palo Santo wood, tied with a red ribbon. "Dude," I replied, exhausted, when he just drops it. I looked down in the puddle of water from the leaking to see a bare footprint within the water. Starting to get freaked out, I stated we need to get back upstairs. We proceeded to the second to last section. Immediately I noticed a cross on the wall that I didn't spot earlier with lavender sage wrapped in purple lace. "Take a quick look around and make sure nothing is going on so we can go," I said, trying not to show that I was getting unnerved. Nothing happened in the section until just before we moved through the double doors, when all the safety lights behind us back to the laundry started flickering. Honestly thinking something was going to happen, but not wanting to show I was starting to freak, I told the rookie to move to the last room. Finally, the last area where we came in from. Luckily, in here was only 2 small planning offices and the hub room. The difference between when we entered the basement till now was that the light was on the inside of the hub room. I told the rookie to watch the hall as I checked the planning offices, which was quick, but when I went back to the hub room to check and turn off the light, I looked down at the server monitor for the main cameras. In the hub room, it had the whole hotel cameras on this one monitor. Up at the front desk, the cameras only show the exterior hallways of the rooms and the pool areas, so I took a glance at the screen and noticed the lights were still flickering in the main laundry. A big pause in the lights occurred and the night vision started to kick on. Slowly, a figure on the screen from the laundry became visible. I realized while intently staring that the figure was standing next to the machine that the white sage was on. A bright flash lit the monitor window as the light came back on. My heart dropped as the room lay empty.
The person who was standing in the night vision of the camera was just gone. I looked away to the door frame of the hub room and see a bundle of black sage nailed to the frame, wrapped in black twine. I walk out, closing the door behind me. "We clear?" asked the rookie. Still stunned by what I saw in the camera, I replied, "We're done down here." We entered the stairwell and locked the door. Back in the lobby, the night auditor came over and asked if we found anything. "I'm going to go out front and smoke. Then I'll show you the issues we found," I said, pulling the pack from my pocket. The auditor, seemingly knowing that I was startled, asked, "You didn't touch the wards, did you?" I looked her in the eye without saying a word. "Oh dear, you did. It's now been roughly a week since I've been there, and I can say I'm not looking forward to going back."
Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.